Hi all, so the last thing we're going to talk about today are verifying inverses using compositions. So what we're going to do is two functions f and g are inverses if and only if f of g of x equals x and g of f of x equals x. So that means I need to plug them into each other and simplify and see if I get x. If I do, then I have inverses, and if I don't, then they are not inverses. So I'm going to start with my f of x function, and I'm going to plug g of x into that. So f of and g of x here is 1/6 x plus 5/2. So I'm just going to plug g of x in for x, and I like to put parentheses around my x so I know where it's going. So I have 6 times 1/6 x plus 5/2 minus 15. Can't forget about that minus 15 because this is only taking up the x spot. So now I have, and I'm just going to distribute. So remember, big times the top divided by the bottom. 6 times 1 is 6, divided by 6 is 1, so I have x. 6 times 5 is 30, divided by 2 is 15, so I have x plus 15 minus 15. Now let's combine some like terms. So here, 15 minus 15, it cancels out, so I have x. So in this case, f of g of x does give me x. Now I need to make sure that g of f of x gives me x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say g of, and f of x is 6x minus 15. So then I'm just going to plug that in. So I have 1/6 times 6x minus 15 plus 5/2. And here, now I'm going to distribute again, big times the top divided by the bottom. So I'm left with 6 over 6 is 1, so I have x minus big times the top divided by the bottom. Well, that gives me 15 over 6 plus 5/2. Well, let's reduce this 15 over 6. So x minus 5/2 plus 5/2. So I have x, negative 5/2 plus 5/2 cancel each other out. So I'm just left with x. So in this case, g of f of x also gave me x. So yes, these are inverses. Yes, these are inverses. And I really should say not these. Yes, f of x and g of x are inverses. Let's look at the second example here. And so in this case, I have f of x equals 1/4 x cubed minus 3, and g of x equals the cube root of 4x minus 12. The first thing I'm going to do is exactly what I did up above. I'm just going to plug my g of x into my f of x. So I have f of the cube root of 4x minus 12. And I'm just going to plug that in only for the x, don't forget. So 1/4 times the cube root of 4x minus 12. All of that is cubed minus 3. All right, so now we just need to simplify. And look, I have a cube root being cubed. Well, right away I know that those things undo each other, so I'm left with 1/4 times 4x minus 12 minus 3. Let's distribute this 1/4 in. So big times the top divided by the bottom. 4 times 1 is 4, divided by 4 is 1, so I have x minus 12 times 1 is 12, divided by 4 is 3. Minus 3, and now let's simplify. X and negative 3 minus 3 is negative 6. So this does not simplify to x, so f of g of x equals x minus 6. Well, I don't even need to do the other one because if one of them doesn't go to x, then it doesn't matter if the other one does. These are not inverses. So in this case, no, f of x and g of x are not inverses. Okay? All right, now you're going to try some on your own.